It's wonderful to have such a geographically diverse group. We're from pretty much all over the state, Tallahassee, Ocala, Tampa Bay, Lee County, Miami, Daytona Beach area, Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Tallahassee. But in any case, some are familiar faces, some are new faces. Christi, Florida, of course, is the regional branch of the International Catholic Peace Movement. Our state coordinator happens to be on the call with us, Sandra Barron. And somewhere along the line, we took on this idea of doing some advocacy on the state level. And we had not really done that in any kind of formidable fashion before. And so we've been doing some homework. We've been doing some organizing. We're very limited. We're a small group. We know we need to network with a lot of other people. We've done that. I had a delightful conversation with the president of Prevent Gun Violence Florida, the former president of the Florida League of Women Voters, who's now in that position. She's invited us to have somebody on her roundtable on gun violence. Likewise, we're very well connected with the anti-death penalty movement, Floridians for Alternatives Against the Death Penalty. So we kind of want to be leaven, and we welcome all people of faith and conscience. I see we have a number of good Quakers with us, some of you that put in that ID, some people that I've recognized from years back, and some names that I've known. In any case, I'm retired professor from the University of North Florida, taught in leadership studies. And now that I'm retired, I can't figure out how I had time to go to work and in my spare time do things like this in the so-called third act. And that's a number of us are that way. But there's also some younger folks that have surfaced into our movement, and we're grateful for them. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you. In a moment, I'm going to kind of give an overview of what we're going to do. But before I do that, I'm going to invite each of you in 30 seconds or less to state your name and where you're from, and specifically a question or an issue or something that you would love to see addressed in this evening, or that brings you here with some concern. So I'm going to just ask, because we probably appear in different sequences here. So I'm going to go down to Jack and Ann McFadden, if you would, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John, for hosting us, and et cetera, et cetera. Make it quick. I think both Jack and I are very invested and want to get rid of the death penalty. And we're very, very impressed with Floridians Against the Death Penalty with our new leader, Maria. And we heard she went to Nepal and did this huge trek. I'm very impressed.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Below you is Suzanne Prenti. Suzanne?
Well, hi, I'm Suzanne Prenti from Tallahassee, and I attend Good Shepherd Catholic Church. And I guess the issues that I would like to see addressed are the issue of eliminating, reducing carbon emissions, specifically methane, in the state of Florida, because we have so much agriculture. And I think that could contribute to a reduction in carbon, the greenhouse gases. So.
And thank you. And next to you on my screen is a gentleman named David Moritz from Gainesville, I understand. David?
Yeah, David Moritz here. And indeed, I am in Gainesville, which has been very helpful for us. I'm working on several things. I'm with Alachua County Environmental Protection Advisory Committee. I've been with them for about 11 years, and I'm very active with that organization. I'm also with the Florida Rights of Nature Network, which is a sponsor for the Right to Clean and Healthy Waters Amendment, which we've been promoting the last few years here, and which we are going at again in 2026. And I think we've gotten somewhere over 100,000, which is not enough to get us on the ballot, of course, but we've done that all with volunteers. So we're very happy with that number, considering that factor.
And right below, Mr. Joe Iannone. Joe, unmute yourself, Joe. Please, everybody unmute. Joe, you're muted.
Hi, yeah, got it. Hi, I'm Joe Iannone here in Hollywood, Florida, the land of the Tequestas, who've been here for 6,000 years ago. Right now, my emphasis is with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty to get as many people and cities and the state and others to endorse it, to cut out and phase out fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to skip our speakers and get the participants here first. Rita, Lucy, Rita, good to see you. Rita, unmute, unmute, unmute. You need to unmute. I don't know if Michael
Okay.
can do that from his end. There we go. Good.
I'm Rita Lucy. I live in Orange City, Florida nowadays. I'm a recent widow, and my interests are private prisons, prison conditions here in Florida, and the death penalty.
All good issues, Lucy. Rita.
Thank you, Rita. And next to you is a gentleman named Edward Cook.
Ed Cook, Miami, Florida. I pay my dues for Pax Christi. That's my only call to fame, I guess. Other than that, I'm on the board of the Great Panthers, who are older adults, politically active, community involved, always voting. Also on the board of what's called the Labor Community Alliance, which is a combination of people who are union members and people who work in 501, nonprofits, and so we're interested in all issues, but we're trying to turn our attention more to having a bigger impact at the state level than we would just out in the wind talking about the national issues.
Thank you, Ed. And below you, at least on my screen, is Brian Olson.
Brian's a good guy.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm Brian Olson from Miami, Miami Friends Meeting, the Quakers, and we're interested in a lot of issues. At the state level, we've primarily been thinking of the getting people, about encouraging people to vote, to register to vote and be educated about voting, and also the environment.
Okay, well, thank you. And up above Ed is Mary Kelly.
Hello, I'm from Parkland, Florida. I've been affiliated, a member of Pax Christi for years. Formerly St. Maurice Pax Christi, and recently just started meeting with eco-spirituality that Pauline and Art Kane are conducting every 2 weeks. And for a long time, Pax Christi St. Maurice, also with Art and the rest of the group, was working on eliminating the death penalty. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm glad to
Mary.
be here.
And then we have some familiar people. Michael.
Hi, Michael from Miami, a member of Pax Christi, Florida, and I'm also involved in the Pax Christi USA Young Adult Caucus, a privilege I have for 1 more year, so pray for me.
Sandra. You're muted, Sandra.
Muted.
Sandra, unmute.
Sandra, unmute.
She's trying.
I think she's working on it.
Well, while she's unmuting, everybody should unmute because we may not be able to do that again.
Okay, there she is.
Nancy,
The
if you
button
would.
wasn't working, sorry.
It's Sandra.
Yep, Sandra Barron, Pax Christi, Florida Coordinator. Nice to be here with you. I apologize for the phone call. One of our members, Art Kane, who Mary just mentioned, has just been having a tough time getting on these meetings and still haven't been able to get him on. So we'll get the recording and we'll figure it out for next time. But thank you all and good to be here. I want to learn about how to be an advocate.
Thank you, Sandra. Working our way down here, I guess we have Nancy. Actually, Nancy, we're gonna wait for our speakers a little later. We should get to hear from them. But Nancy, I think is actually you have a prayer for. Well, tell us what you're here for, and then go ahead and lead us in a prayer. I think that was the game plan.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I'm Nancy O'Byrne. I live in St. Augustine, Florida, the land of the Timucua people. I'm the past coordinator for Pax Christi, Florida. And I'm an advocate for the homeless, for those on death row, for prison reform and criminal justice reform, for immigration reform. I'm an advocate for the poor and the disenfranchised, and I'm happy to be with you tonight. And shall I go ahead and lead us in the opening prayer, John?
If you would, please, Nancy.
Let us put us, we are always in the presence of the holy, but let us be mindful of that right now. Lord God, Father, Mother, to the poor, to the powerful, to the weak. You created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a spirit of community and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us. And may we advocate for the common good, to form bonds of unity, not division, and to nurture the relationships that will bring your kingdom here on earth. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Nancy, thank you for that absolutely beautiful prayer. And it so befits what we have tried to strive to be in what we call the Pax Christi Florida Legislative Advocacy Campaign, the acronym PC-FLAC 24. Some of you have seen this perhaps ad nauseum, but for the benefit of some folks who maybe have not, I'm just going to take a little context here, and I'm going to share a screen, and hopefully this is going to come up, and you'll see our website. You see the website there?
Yes.
Right, okay. So, you know, there you have it right there, seeking common ground for the common good. And we underscore that although we're rooted in our Catholic identity, we have many non-Catholic members and affiliates, and we welcome all people of faith and conscience. And as Nancy's prayer, and I had no idea what she was going to pray, underscore is that we've been suffering under the scourge of such division, as we call in the signs of the times, and a political culture that excludes people, a political culture that polarizes us and diminishes our sense of affinity to the common good. We also are very conscious of Christians, those of us who identify as Christians, that we take great offense by those who have used Christ's name to advance what would be called Christian nationalism and is a gross misrepresentation of the gospel. And so we want to bring an alternative voice, one of compassion, one of inclusion, and yet challenging. We want to be listening, we want to be engaging. And of course, we are going to be learning because we have so much to learn. But as one of our presenters shared with me privately during the previous meeting, many of our legislators don't know a whole lot either. So we're all in this to kind of together. You can explore this website on your own, but what I want to underscore and why we're really here today is to spend some focus on the Florida legislature. And there's a number of resources here. And one of the things that I find to be so helpful is, you know, how do you catch the news of what's going on? And couple of media sources. The Florida Channel Capitol Update will actually have proceedings of every committee meeting, and they have a marvelous summary at the end of every week. And then once the legislature is in session, beginning January 8th, there'll be a daily summary. So that's without doubt probably the best source of what's going on. And then there are a number of sources there that you can explore. But to give you an idea here of what we're doing is we said tonight we want to kind of focus on emerging bills. We want to understand how the process works. We want to know how we can interface with that and learn some skills about how to do all that. I had taken some time earlier today. You can go through this either through the House or through the Senate, but I'm going to go through the House. One of the things that's very marvelous is when you get to the House, over on the far right on the top, you see a thing called tracking. And this is your opportunity to create an account, and you're going to be able to identify the bills that you think you want to follow. So I'm going to put in my password here. Of course, you all get to see this. Maybe you don't. Hopefully you don't. But hopefully that will work. And I'll sign in, and it will say I did it correctly. Does it give it to me? It didn't allow me to do that. Remember my email address. I have to put in my email address. Okay.
Right back. I thought I heard the
You seeing that? And that is not working. Why is that not working? Because I don't know. I guess it didn't do that. So in any case, oh, there it is. So it comes in. So these are all the bills that I'm tracking. Now, that's probably about, I don't know, 90 or so bills. But when you actually go to the bills on the top, you'll see, if you click the word bills on top, you'll see that there are, let's see if that comes up. It's just really being really slow. We're looking for both the House and the Senate. And you're going to see there you are in that upper right blue column, 807 bills. It was 803 about 3 hours ago. So they're still filing bills. So, you know, how we make sense of this is a whole other thing. But, you know, in my quick review of this, and we're going to hear more from Karen Woodall on this, but there are some bills that are promising in some of our areas of concern, perhaps in the area of criminal justice. But let me get out of that. I'm going to stop sharing that one. And I want to say a word about who we're going to invite here to speak next. And that's our dear friend, Karen. Oh, before I do this, please use chat to put in questions, because we'll have an opportunity maybe to address some questions in the latter minutes of the gathering. And also to remember that we are recording this, and that we'll have an opportunity to post this to our website for people that maybe have missed it and want to follow up with that in some fashion. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to pull up, Karen has an amazing organization, and my good friend Russell, you'll hear from Russell shortly. Russell introduced me to the Florida People's Advocacy Center, and I'm going to get their website up, and we're going to watch a short little video clip. Here we go. Let's go to this, and let's see if I can do that. Share content here. Share. Okay, the Florida People's Advocacy Center. And this is a short little 3-minute video, kind of speaks for itself. And that'll serve to introduce our friend Karen. And Michael, if you can double check to make sure that this audio comes
excuse me.
on once the video comes on.
Oh, well, I would have to share it on my end. See if that works for you.
There's Karen.
Okay.
Which I can do if this doesn't work. No problem.
You want me to stop sharing or start it?
Why don't you start the video?
Why don't you mute us?
Okay, I'm going to start the video. Sorry, I can't get that audio up.
Video.
I'll go ahead and I'll do that, John.
Thank you, thank you.
There's a separate button for sharing audio as well, sharing.
You want, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'll let you do that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
In 2017, we came across this building. It's 12,000 square foot, two-story building that's a mile from the Capitol in a historic African American community called Frenchtown, and it was perfect.
One of the many is that there's a safe space for us to exist and to be able to be our full selves that we can stay at.
Allowing us to be able to have some place to stay, a community to be able to feel like we belong in here in Tallahassee, where no one knows anyone here in Tallahassee, so it gives us the benefit to be able to come somewhere that's familiar and warm.
A very safe and welcoming environment that makes the lobbying process less intimidating.
And the center is a home far away from home.
But some of the mainstays and consistent organizations have been the Florida Latina Advocacy Network, the Florida Immigrant Coalition, Farm Workers Self-Help, Florida Cares, Hope Community Center, Florida Planned Parenthood. The Dream Defenders have office space here and have used it for mobilizations and training. So there's been a very
Well, thank you. And there you are. That really is you, Karen. Kind of went from the video to your screen in one seamless move. We are so grateful for you to be with us on fairly short notice and for working us into your schedule here. It was Russell's inspiration to suggest that we have you talk about what's in play, as you are closer to it than perhaps any of us.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you all for being on. I'm so excited that you're looking at increasing your ongoing advocacy, hopefully at the Florida Capitol, because you know it takes a village and we need everybody. Thank you for sharing the video from the Florida People's Advocacy Center. That's a new venture for me. I'm training my replacements. This will be my 45th legislative session. I started when I was 3, but so I see friends on this video, and I'm happy to meet others. So, and I'm also very proud to say that our center housed virtually every group that was under attack this past few sessions, except for organized labor, because they pay for hotels, but they support us. And that's why we're there. So people have a safe place that can come and learn and spend time and go up and try to impact the policy decisions that affect their lives. And it's so important to have all of us as advocates joining with those who are directly affected in talking to these folks. The dynamics of the legislature this session, last session, as you know, was horrible, mostly driven by the governor's agenda for running for president. So there was a lot of pressure on the legislature to give him everything he wanted. And we saw there is a supermajority in the legislature, meaning Republicans control everything and Democrats are in smaller numbers, and it's difficult. We can't really stop anything or pass any progressive legislation. And because of the dynamics with the governor, even Republican members who are moderate, who knew better, felt compelled to give him everything he wanted. And that, frankly, has done a number on our state, and it has set us back for a while, but we will be able to come out of that. The good news for this session is, in dynamics, the word at the Capitol is those members who were so under pressure from him and forced to do stuff they didn't particularly agree with are kind of over it. They're not interested in running the governor's culture wars, his anti-immigrant. They're not interested in doing his bidding. That does not mean there will not be negative legislation filed, but the pressure, the force to get all this stuff done is not there. And that's evidenced right now by the fact that they had committee meetings this week. They'll have committee meetings next week before they start full session in January. There are fewer bills that have been filed during committee weeks. They mostly have committee weeks so they can have fundraisers, because they're not allowed to raise money during session. So that's really why they have committee weeks. But last year we saw a lot of frenetic activity around moving bad legislation early on, and we're not seeing that right now. It doesn't mean there's not negative legislation coming forth, but it's not with the same kind of energy that we saw last session. That said, we're in the second year of the current leadership's leadership. So the speaker is in his last year, the president's in her last year. So the incoming speaker and the incoming Senate president have a lot of power this year. The incoming speaker is Danny Perez, a young guy from Miami-Dade who, he has his conservative credentials, but he's a bit more progressive than what we've seen coming forward. So there's hope. He has a particular interest in some criminal justice reform. He has an interest in mitigating the damage done by the anti-immigrant legislation that was passed last session. The Senate president, Ben Albritton, is big agriculture. That's his primary focus. So that's going to be a bit interesting. And we'll see what that means. They're focusing on a lot of resiliency conversations in the legislature, which has some potential for addressing some climate change issues, and particularly a focus on dealing with the harmful dynamics of increased climate change and hurricanes. So there's some opportunity there. I can't stress how important it is for everybody who is concerned, that everybody needs to be concerned about this stuff, coming to the Capitol, not in a big, 200-person rally for a day, but having 3 or 4 or 5 people every week. It's why we have our training centers. So our folks that are working on social and economic justice can send people each week to have a continuous, consistent presence and build relationships with legislators, their staff, committee members, and have that kind of presence ongoing, while people back home are talking to their offices at home about priorities. I know you have a criminal justice concern. We're making some progress on prosecuting children as adults, which we've been working on for 6 years. with Republicans, which you have to have in the mix right now, or you're not going anywhere. Climate change, we've been working for 5 years to pass a heat stress prevention act on education and training. We're seeing some preemption stuff come up, but it's going to be important to have everybody rally around that as we help focus conversations on what's really impacting our communities. That's not to say the governor is still running some stuff. You know, the legislature allowed him not to have to resign to run for president, which they will be sorry for in this session. But we have to have the voices of folks who have an understanding of how we build community, how we have to stand together, what's important for this state to counter the clutter and noise that they hear from corporate interest, people who are lobbying because they want to get breaks for corporations and all those kinds of things you know about. We can counter that, but we have to have a consistent presence talking particularly to our Republican members. Sometimes we want to talk to our friends and we need to work with them. They need our support. They need to know that we love them and they're doing the right thing. But we have to get Republican members. And with term limits in this state, when I started, we did not have term limits. In my opinion, it's the worst thing that's happened to this state because people get elected. They don't have a clue. They want to be in leadership, but they don't have time to be a leader. So they do what the current leadership says. And we really always have had term limits. They're called elections. So we're in a tough place with that, but it's also an opportunity because there are all these new members and they don't really know that they're supposed to hate Medicaid. They don't really know a lot. They're listening to what their leadership tells them. So they need to hear from you. They need to hear the perspective of all the people in their communities, and they're educable, but they've got to have that influence. So I am grateful to y'all for having this meeting and planning to engage in a stronger way, not only through this session, but over the interim and leading up for next session. And the thing I'll end on with this is this year, we're going to have some positive bills filed. They're not probably going to pass, but it's important to set them up. And that's what's happening, setting them up for next session under different leadership that will have different priorities.
Can you give an example of, for instance, a bill that might be percolating that fits in that mold or at least similar?
Yeah, we have, I mentioned prosecuting children as adults for your criminal justice folks. I've been working on that for 6 years. But we can't get traction on both sides. This session, we are actually going to have Republican co-sponsors. We don't really anticipate that it's going to pass all the way through, but we are being told that it'll pass through at least one committee on both sides, which is important because that'll set it up for next year where we will have more positive response from the leadership. So that's an example.
Well, thank you so much for kind of getting us going here. And you will have, well, I'm sure we'll be hearing from you at different points during the evening. But let me throw the ball over to our good friend Russell Meyer. Reverend Russell Meyer is a Lutheran priest and president of the Florida Council of Churches. And Russell's been working with our steering committee, and he's been very resourceful. And I know he's a big supporter of Karen and the Florida People's Advocacy. But Russell, can you kind of talk us through, if you will, the legislative process and you know, for instance, Karen mentioned it made it through one committee on both sides, and that was a good sign. And how do you begin to see these good signs, and what makes some bills fail and some bills move forward? How does it work? How is power wielded? And how do we react to that? How do we respond in an appropriate way at the right time? That kind of thing.
Well, it's good to be with you all. Thank you, John. And I just want to say bravo to Pax Christi, Florida for taking on this kind of an active campaign. Democracy only works and lasts when we practice it. And democracy is in trouble in this country because not enough of us are practicing it. So what you're doing now is creating a world in which violence might not be the order of the day because you're practicing participatory democracy. So I need to say that as we get started, because as Karen pointed out, that the legislature is out of balance. And so it's very hard to put forward progressive, common good legislation because the votes aren't there. Much of what we'll be doing this year is more along the line of stopping damage. So for something to become law, it has to pass both in the House and in the Senate, and the governor has to sign it. Though the governor can allow things to become law, but this governor is very proactive. And so oftentimes the same bill will appear as a House bill and as a Senate bill. Rule of thumb, House bills are always odd numbers, Senate bills are always even numbers. And generally when bills get sent to drafting, everything had to be sent to drafting a couple of weeks ago, and all bills have to be filed by the first day of session. So we're in this period when bills can appear at any time as being filed. In order for bills to go through, they have to normally be seen by 3 committees. Supermajority can waive the rules on any of this stuff at any time. That's part of the danger of it. And so if you're tracking a bill, let's say you're tracking the prison air conditioning bill. Well, it doesn't have a Senate partner bill. It's just in the House right now. It's been assigned to a committee, but that committee has not heard that bill. And so if we are successful in the campaign to get the committee to hear the bill, then it gets sent to one of the other committees. Let's just say the bill gets adopted and gets sent to the House floor. If there's not a Senate component of the bill, when the House passes it and sends it over to the Senate, then it's up to the Senate to decide whether or not they want to take up the House bill. And that doesn't happen a lot. And so you got to do both things at the same time. Oftentimes the House and the Senate will have a little bit different language in their bills because they got different people with different interests. So then at that point, things have to be reconciled along the way. As things go through the committee process, amendments get offered, and oftentimes a bill will have a strike all the night before it shows up, and you go into the committee meeting and it's a different bill altogether. The only thing that's remained is the title. And so I say all these things because you heard Karen say earlier, constant presence is the most effective way of doing things. Well, things are in play constantly. And if you just have a one big rally day, and you put all your stuff around supporting a bill early on, actually the text of that bill could change radically by the time it gets passed. And so having a constant presence is very important, number one, so that you're following legislation as it develops and weighing in on it and supporting it or giving counsel as to why the changes aren't adequate, because things are dynamic, they change. But the other thing is the constant presence is a continual reminder to members of the legislature that people back home are paying attention. And so that's really important. The other thing that I want to pick up on is that as we look at our particular issues and focus in on them and learn about them and drill down in them and then connect them to our community ministries and et cetera, we're often bringing information into the room when we meet with our member offices, whether it's the member themselves or their staff. We're bringing information into the room that oftentimes is not there. They simply don't know all the details, or they don't have the human story that goes along with it. And the greatest treasure we have from the faith perspective are the human stories of pain, suffering, need, want, redemption, hope, recovery, etc. That's our treasure. And those are the stories that actually can help win the day for creating good policy.
Thank you, Russell. Let me stop you there, and we'll have a chance to hear from you a little bit later as well. And but I'm going to get segue here out of your reference to the point. So when you sit down with your legislators and talk with them, I'd like to introduce to you Meg Olson. Some of us have met Meg before. Meg is from Washington, D.C. She is with the Catholic Social Justice Lobby organization known as Network, and she is their Grassroots Mobilization Director. And Meg is going to share with us some kind of practical, how do you do it kind of thing when you sit down and have that meeting, and how do you set it up, and what can you say more about that, building on what Russell has said, Ms. Meg?
Yeah, thanks so much, John. And yeah, it's great to be back with Pax Christi. Network works closely with Pax Christi and our Quaker friend here with Friends Committee on National Legislation. So, and previously to my time in Network, I was a lobbyist and an organizer at Catholic Charities in St. Louis and on the Missouri Catholic Conference. So state legislatures are close to my heart, and you're making me want to come down to Tallahassee and work with y'all at some point this legislative session. I just want to, and Russell started to get into this, and certainly Karen, what a wealth of wisdom. I'd love to come see your center. Even in these super gerrymandered, really difficult times, it's important to remember that your state reps and senators work for you, right? And you as a constituent have every right to talk to them about your concerns. And, constituents have power that other lobbyists do not. And it is because of those stories, and it's also because of your vote, and it's because of the power you have back home. And especially for this group, your perspective as people of faith, as predominantly Catholics in this room, certainly Quakers, your commitment to Catholic social justice, the mission of Pax Christi, it's a unique perspective that Florida needs to hear. And I think the biggest thing is that your personal story and your moral message is what is unique to your elected official and their staff. And you certainly don't have to have all the facts and figures. So I hope no one feels intimidated. I just want to talk a little bit because there are, and Karen brought this up as well, there are various ways to meet or places to meet with your elected officials. And I think both have their pros and cons. So I'm a big fan of in-district meetings. I think they're very accessible. I think they level the playing field for people who might not have the resources to go to Tallahassee. And it really allows you to engage maybe more members of your community, including people who are directly impacted by the harmful policies. You are going to be talking to a staff person, and has been hinted at tonight. Sometimes the staffers know more about the legislation than their bosses do. So you might be talking to someone who's more educated about the bill that you're talking about, unless like their boss is on a committee or something. However, the downside, in addition to not talking to your elected official, is that that staff person is not going to give you a clear answer probably on where that elected official stands. They're going to say, well, you know, I'm not representing my boss's opinion, or, you know, they're not going to come out and say, yes, like the senator supports this. Very, very rarely will they do that. So that is a little frustrating. You kind of have to read between the lines. A staff person, though, in district will have more time, most likely, to talk with you. Tallahassee going to Tally, as I'm seeing it in the chat. I love that. Definitely, you get to talk with your elected official. You get to just the energy of the Capitol, meet other coalition partners, hopefully, who are working on the bill, maybe pop into a hearing. The time could be shorter, and I just, you know, this happens certainly on the Hill here in DC and certainly in the state legislature. So you have a meeting scheduled and suddenly your member has to be pulled into a hearing. Whoops, I lost my video. Hang on.
But your audio came in marvelous, Jeff.
Oh, good. So you have to be a little bit more flexible when you're under the dome. So, sometimes, you know, I've seen in the chat just, you know, small groups going around the Capitol together. I can't stress enough, someone who trains a lot of people to go on visits and has organized lots of lobby days myself and lobby visits. And it's so important not to just do the drop in once and then leave. It's fun, but it's certainly not effective. It's all about the long-term relationships. But nothing makes me happier when I see a really great, like, multi-faith, multi-racial coalition, multi-generational coalition of people going into an office, practicing together, and like showing power in numbers and showing that support, or maybe, you know, wanting a bill not to pass, like support or anger about an issue, like cuts across all differences. And so I do think if you're able to advocate in community, it's such a marvelous experience. And it also shares, especially if you're not a seasoned advocate, it provides you with a chance to get the experience without having the burden of having to do all the talking or all the preparation yourself. I think too, it really provides you connecting with, maybe like if you're lobbying on increasing money in your state budget for SNAP, for food stamps, you can reach out to people who volunteer at your church's food pantry, or maybe you know someone at the local Catholic charities or something that you can bring with you to the meeting, and perhaps even center a voice of an impacted person in that meeting, which of course is always just the most powerful thing you can do. So preparing for the lobby visit, I think the most important thing to remember is that this meeting is a dialogue. I was recently helping out with the Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice earlier this fall, and the students were so well prepared, but they also, I think, were debate team students, and they just thought they got to talk for like 15 minutes. I was like, no, you have to like pause and ask questions. And I think especially when we get nervous, we just want to talk at our member or their staffer, and we forget that this is a conversation. You are sharing your knowledge, your faith, your values, and hopefully personal stories to illustrate how the legislation or the bill impacts you personally, or maybe it's a friend and family member, or just the community at large. And you are also there to listen to your members' perspective, your elected officials' perspective. And especially if you're going to be working in coalition, this is so important, because you're reporting back what you hear from your member, because this is not, your visit is part of a much larger strategy. I can't stress that enough. You are getting, as a constituent in a certain time and place, are getting, everyone's collecting little bits and pieces of information together to get that member of the rep or the senator to move to a certain place. And even if if there's disagreement, you are still, at the end of the day, you are asking your elected official
to vote yes or no on a piece of legislation. And that, of course, and so in terms of homework, you of course need to do some research. You don't have to exhaust. That's what the lobbyists are for. That's what the policy people are for. Sounds like Karen's organization has lots of data on bills. Here in DC, I work closely with an org called the Center on Budget and Policy Priority, and they have the Florida Policy Institute, which has lots of data on your state budget in all sorts of issues, especially human needs and environmental spending. US Census data is also your friend. So for example, if you're advocating for a bill that would increase the number of housing vouchers for senior citizens, you can drill down into census data to your county and let your member know how many low-income seniors there are. And again, even though they're from your community, they're so out of touch. I remember when I was a lobbyist in Missouri, I was talking about funding for WIC, for women, infant and children. And here was the pro tem of the Missouri Senate, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I think only like 2 or 3% of people in my district rely on WIC." And it was actually 25% of mothers in his district were receiving WIC, and he did not know that. So definitely some facts are really important. And it's important to really research your state rep or senator. And the big question when you're doing that research is how much power do they have over whether this piece of legislation is passed or not? How proximate are they to the bill? Again, how much power do they have over the piece of legislation? Are they on the committee that's going to determine whether or not it gets out of that committee? Are they somewhere in leadership and that vote that bill is going to get to the floor? Have they co-sponsored a piece of legislation that's similar in the past? Are they, I know term limits, but are they still considered senior? Do they have influence over other people in their party to sign on to a bill? And this is going to really help you shape your ask. So if it's a bill that let's go back to this bill that'll increase housing vouchers for seniors. Let's say they're on the committee that deals with housing. Then you're like, whoa, okay, my ask for that member is going to be, will you vote this out of committee? If they're not on that committee, then it's more like, will you vote for this bill when it comes to the floor for a vote? Right. So doing that research is going to help you shape what you're asking your elected official to do. And then really, again, as to echo what Russell said, preparing that personal story. Elected officials can argue with you about facts and figures and say, oh, that data is, progressive or woke or something, but they cannot argue with you about your personal experience.
Let me interrupt you there, Meg. Okay, because
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time. We've got a lot of stuff here, and I'm going to break rank from kind of our script. So bear with me, Russell, Karen, and Meg, because we have to have a hard stop by 8:15. We promised to people here. And we do want to hear from some other people, but I'm going to ask a question, and maybe either all three of you could respond to this. And that is, as we're going into, there's not a whole lot that people can do between now and even though I guess there are committee meetings next week. And unless people are following that, it's not likely that people are going to go to Tallahassee next week. Maybe, I don't know. But when the session opens on the 8th of January, does that preclude really meeting in the local district? Are they going to be in Tallahassee for 60 days except for weekends? Or should we be meeting them in Tallahassee, or should we still be meeting locally? And how do you do that if they're in Tallahassee? And I know there's legislative aids, but it may not be as impactful. How do we get leverage with what energy we have? Should we get 3 people to go every week, or tell people to meet in their local districts? Those are different energies.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yes, to put the focus on.
You can have, it's good to have people come to Tallahassee, but they do have people in their district offices back home. And for those, it's very powerful when the presence in Tallahassee is combined with a bunch of people calling, going by to visit, having a candlelight vigil in front of their local office, they call up to Tallahassee and say, we have all these people here. So it's both, even during session.
How do we know, though, what time to go? How do we know what issue? You know, you have, like, for instance, now, this is one concrete illustration of example of coalition. I alluded to this amazing conversation with the president of Prevent Gun Violence Florida. And she's invited us to have a representative on their roundtable that will start meeting every week in January. And they will have a presence in Tallahassee. And they will at some point go in, because there are a number of measures that are at least moderately putting some constraint on the free wielding of guns. And there are others that are actually problematic. How do we know when those people are coming? How do we connect with them? Do you facilitate anything like that, Karen? Do you post an event schedule of, hey, people on the gun advocacy violence are coming in such a date, get up here? How do we know?
So I don't post that on the issues on the groups I'm working with and following. I alert them. But the truth is, the reason we talk about a continuous presence, you really need to be there before something gets on the committee agenda. That's how we get things on the committee agenda. We need to talk. We talk to people all session long saying these issues are in your committee. We want your support on them. We want you to help get them on the agenda. And then when it gets on the agenda, an alert will go out from all those groups saying, hey, on Wednesday at 9:30, our bill is going to be up in the Senate Judiciary Committee. We need you up here. So that's kind of how that, and we don't always know. Sometimes people get frustrated. Give us more notice. We don't know. They don't have to publish the agendas until 48 hours before the agenda. So being involved with others who are working on it helps keep you up to date. And if you use that bill tracking system you pointed out, it will alert you when issues you're following are going to be on an agenda. But you don't want to really wait till it comes up on the agenda. You've got to work your issues for and against all session long.
Let me open this up to other people. Some of you have done outreach. I know Joe Iannone has done some work, and I know he feels that we got nowhere with the so-called fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, and that doesn't have a sponsor. How do you get somebody to even begin to thinking of sponsoring something? Joe, do you want to talk about what you did and where you're leaning and what you're seeing and hearing? And
yeah, sure. I've met with my representative and senator through the Meyer app about the fossil fuel. But frankly, I'm aiming more for 2025 to build capacity, to flood the zone. I've also contacted Sister Worley, who's a chancellor with Archbishop Wensky, to see if that Meyer app could be put eventually in parish bulletins so we can build up volume, because once they fill out the app, it reaches every senator and representative, in the state. The other thing I did is I met with my commissioner here in Hollywood, Charlie Schumann, to try to get the city of Hollywood to endorse the non-proliferation treaty, which other cities have done. I've also contacted Delaney Reynolds, who represents young people, Miami Sea Rise, to get a coalition of young people throughout the state to take on this issue. I have a colleague in St. Thomas Law School who's brought it to the environmental law faculty, and also Nova Southeastern, to see if we can get law schools around the country, around the state, students to take on this issue. So I'm really looking for capacity in the next months, because right now the only committee is the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Environment. The only two bills are on bears and mangroves, which maybe there could be a friendly amendment, but I don't have any hope of that. So I'm trying to build capacity for 2025 because I think we need votes. We need people in the grassroots to kind of lobby their representatives, not just a few people, to get this endorsed. So that's kind of where my energy, is going. And the other thing is there's a woman who contacted me, maybe you know about her, Susan Glickman, who's a climate and clean energy advocate. And she's agreed to work with me also on this issue throughout the state. So I don't have any hope for this legislature. In fact, this legislature last year passed a bill to prevent my city of Hollywood, which had investments in environment and social government concerns, their municipal funds. They passed a bill to outlaw that. So our city had to drop their investment in environmental justice issues. So we're really going against a legislature that is going another direction. But I think if we could build capacity of people, we have a chance in 2025, which is the Jubilee year. And the Jubilee year frees the slaves, forgives debt, and lets the land be untilled for regeneration. So I'm aiming really for 2025. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joe. What about other people that might be advocating on a particular area and have engaged legislators locally or in Tallahassee? I know Suzanne has been in Tallahassee. We know that Russell works it quite regularly, but unbeknownst to us, are there any of you that have knocked on doors and have connected with maybe other organizations or, Karen underscored and both Meg did the notion of a coalition of multiple people sitting in that room. How do we get ourselves organized to do that? We got Quakers and Catholics here, and I don't know what other cross-pollination we got going on. It's a strategic question, and we can't be experts in all of this. How do we move forward? Where do we connect with? What strategic alliances do we need to create? What actions do we need to do? We're looking and listening.
That's Karen.
Anne.
Yeah. Well,
Anne, you froze. Anne, you're frozen. Can you hear?
thing that I leave behind that says exactly what our group is interested in and why we're interested in it. And very brief, usually with one page or something like that. And I'm wondering if you didn't mention that, but if that's something that, I think what you were saying about being part of their role. One day I went into, we were advocating for birth centers up in Washington, and we had this young fellow who was, we were the aide, and I said to him, told him a little bit of what's happening in our area. I said, "You're welcome to come and visit." Well, then he take me up on it, and he came and visited the birth center and really had his own experience of it. So I think, as you were saying, relationships are everything, but invite them into some of the activities and things that you have. You never know when some of the young ones especially want to have some experiences in their own life. Leave a paper with the stats and a couple of things of what you're doing in their area.
Others, any other example of an action or a strategy?
Yeah, John, I really would just for a second, Jack and I are very, very involved in the Sierra Club here in South Florida, and we have what's called an EIJ committee, equality and justice, but we're working on the very same issues and trying to, get ourselves involved with the legislature in Tallahassee. So whatever I learn in the next couple months, I certainly will pass on.
Let me ask you, if anyone would be inclined to go to Tallahassee and be on a short list that would have sufficient flexibility in their schedule, at least to be willing to consider that, we would like to know that. Say I get a call from the woman from Prevent Gun Violence, says we're going to be there on X number of days. You got anybody that can join us? We would like to have a Pax Christi person or a like-minded person. It would be good to have a bank of names of people
Yeah,
who
that's a
would be
good idea.
willing to go to Tallahassee, not to the exclusion of the local contact. But the Tallahassee thing is, I think, a very, I'm hearing, if you had to say what's more important, I'm hearing this order: regular sustained presence in Tallahassee with a few people, 1. 2, contacting and presence in your local community. And 3, 100 people showing up in Tallahassee. So I think we're convinced we're not going to organize 100 people going to Tallahassee, but there might be a group that's going with 100 people, and some of our people would want to go there. Help me discern that. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, yes.
It does. It does. I would like, if anyone is even disposed to possibly going to Tallahassee, if you could put that into chat. I asked a question, I think, to that effect in the chat. That would be helpful for us to know concretely. We have about 5 minutes left here. Let me throw the ball back to Meg. Meg promised to say, hey, she's got a ditty on, hey, how you can write a letter to the editor, and real quickly bring it down to 2 minutes, if you could, Meg.
Sure. Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send that video that Network has, because it's about 7 minutes, quick and dirty.
But we have to forward it to people. We can.
But I'm a huge fan of letters to the editor. I think, especially after you meet with your elected official, it's a great way to hold them accountable, right? You can say, I met with Representative Smith. He said he was open to this bill. He voted against it. Shame on him. Or you can, thank your member for voting a certain way, or encourage them after. I had a great meeting. I think we see eye to eye on something. Senator, do the right thing, right? I think it can create a lot of buzz. And it's just another tool you have at your disposal. But I do think it's a great, you can write a letter to the editor without having a visit, asking your member to, your elected official to vote a certain way on a bill. But I think it's a great accountability tool as well after you have that meeting. So
okay, well, do send me the link to that video, and we'll see that it gets circulated. One of the things too that I'm not going to do it now because we don't have time, but if you haven't looked at it on our website, which I began with at the PC-FLAC website, and if one of you could, I don't know if Michael's still on the call, could you put that website? Well, I guess they have it already. Just make sure that the PC-FLAC 24 website is in chat. But if you go into just below legislature where the issues are, and it's very rustic. We're trying to develop, if you will, I wouldn't call them position papers yet, but it's the best thing that we have right now for information sharing, and probably the most information and developed. We have like 8 issues that we've identified. The 2 that have the most content are in the area of crisis and creation, which is the climate change issue, and the death penalty issue. And what you'll see there is, some basis of a position of why this is important. And then you'll see a number of articles, but then you'll see existing legislation that impacts it positively or negatively. And of course, it's very rudimentary. It needs a lot more work. And then theoretically, new bills that would come up, and we would post that. But then underneath that, and I think most excitingly, is potential partner groups. So you're going to see, for instance, into crisis and creation, about 12 or 15 organizations, some of whom you all are involved in. And if they're not there, we want to know about it. And we somehow got to get those groups networked. And then we need leaders in each of these issues. See, like Joe Iannone is probably the most, and don't blush, Joe, but he's invested so much energy. He's the best shot that we have as a front runner on environmental issues. And not that he knows all of it, but he's learning it, and he's connecting and he's networking with a lot of other people. But
And
he's our,
also, we need to congratulate him for getting his letter in the NCR a couple of weeks ago.
yes, yes. And Joe is just doing amazing stuff, you know. And there's a guy like, he's not on the call because he's in the Dominican Republic right now, Father Fred Roos, who works closely with Nancy, who's on this call, who's very networked with, where Nancy may have stepped off, who is very networked with Floridians Against the Death Penalty. So again, it's relationships. It's just not relationships with the legislators. It's relationships among ourselves and getting affinity. So if there's an issue that's dear to you, connect with the people that energize you and can motivate you. And you know, so that this is really democracy coming from ground up. And we want to nurture that. We want to support that. We want to affirm that. And we're almost out of time, excuse me, but let me ask, and I know we didn't get to hear everything that Russell, actually, Russell, I think I'm going to give you the last word, Russell. Can you do the last word? And you know where you want to take it. The Holy Spirit's going to take it, Russell. Lead us in a reflective charge that reminds us of who we are and what we're about.
So the Florida legislature really needs to have peace embedded in all of its work. There's an organization I know that has peace built into its name, right? So you're called more than anything else to be in the room with your member or your member's staff to help remind them why they are in the room, right? And that the process of making law oftentimes weeds out, pushes to the side the most sincere and honest and good reasons why people end up being in the room to begin with. And more than anything else, we're there to call people to their humanity and to
that's
put
not
that
the truth.
humanity as much as possible in all the work that they do. And when we do that, we're healing a process. There is so much discord right now, not just in society, but even in the Florida legislature. Name calling has become routine over the past couple of years, and the disregard of one another and etc. So more than anything else, more than any other story, I'd like you to remember that you're Pax Christi, Florida, and that when you're in the room, you want to bring people to experience, to understand the very dignity by which God created them. And it's out of that dignity for one another that that goodness comes into being in society. Goodness does not come into being in society outside of the dignity of every human being being recognized. And so if we're going to do good law, then it has to be based upon our humanity. And when we're in the room, we can witness that. We can call that out. I'm going to end with this real quick story. Last year, there was a particular representative who got very nasty about the trans community and called them less than human terms in public. It was shocked even his own members. And he was ostracized by just about everyone for calling people imps and devils. I ran into him in the hallway. He had 3 sergeants at arms protecting him at the time. It was right. It was right before Easter was coming, and he recognized who I was. I'm usually in my clerics, and I just extended to him the Christ that we know on the cross on Good Friday, humanized him in that moment. I think he was taken by surprise by it. He didn't know what to say. By reminding him there was one man who died for us all, right? And that there was hope for all of us.
Amen.
And so when we get the opportunity and the moment to do that, to call people back to their true selves made in the image of God, we might not get past what we want to see past, but we're building the relationship in which good policy can be made. And without those relationships, good policy will never be made. So
Thank you, Russ.
be the peace that is Pax Christi.
And as the season of Advent and as we celebrate the gift of peace and Christmas, you've given us much to think about. We are grateful for the gift of each of you and all the people that are in your various circles and your communities. Empower them, share with them, talk with them, and let this conversation continue. Let us pray for one another and let us discern. I know the steering committee will probably not meet again until after Christmas because right now things go in 100 directions, but we'll be talking. But thank you all for being with us. Last word, last call. I don't want, if somebody has something on the top of their heart, they got to say it. Silence is golden. God be with you all. Thank you.